This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
On behalf of the Kew Garden Hills community, we'd like to thank the Yeshiva Chafetz Chaim, and the Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Harish Shlita, Rav Grumlat Shlita, for making the Yeshiva available to us to be able to come together barabim, for divrei hasoros, and to express our grief and sorrow. Thank the Rosh Yeshiva Shlita for taking the time out of his busy schedule to grace us with his presence, to offer us divrei chizuk. May the yeshiva be only used from here on for simchas. May the Rosh Yeshiva and the Anhos HaYeshiva see much nachas from the Talmidim, lahagdol Torah lahadira. I want to acknowledge the presence of Rabbanim Chashuvim. We thank all the organizers of tonight's event. Chazak, led by Rav Ilan and Yaniv Meirav. I want to thank Rabbi Chaim Schwartz, Rabbi Elisha Hiziger, Ari and Nechem Yahach, Rabbi Newman, V'chol mi she'oiskim b'tzorchei tzibur be'amunah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishalem scharam. This was the very last thing that anybody wanted to do on a Motzei Shabbos. For the last 18 days, before we were shocked to hear the horrific news, Klal Yisrael had been storming the heavens for the safe return of Yaakov Naftali ben Rachel Devorah, Gilad Michal ben Bat Galim, Eyal ben Iris Teshura. For 18 days we went to sleep and we woke up thinking about our three brothers in Eretz Yisrael. For 18 days we said Tehillim, even at the Chasanos, when the Chasan and Kala stood under the chuppah, we davened, we sang Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael. For 18 days our hearts went out to three boys who we never met and knew nothing about. For 18 days we dreamt. We dreamt about the days Rebbeinu Shalom performed miracles for us in Eretz Yisrael. For 18 days we collectively hoped and prayed for the best. And when the 18 days passed, our worst nightmare came true. I guess this year, the 3 weeks, the Bein HaMetzarim, begin a little bit early. We believe that all Jewish tragedy is a function of Churban Beis HaMikdash. But particularly, the abduction, the kidnapping of Bachurei Yisrael. We read on Tisha B'Av, the Navi Yirmiyah tells us, Ki olem maves b'chaloinenu ba b'armanoiseinu. That during the Churban, death came into our homes, into our windows. Says the pasuk, lehachris oilel michutz bachurim meirachayvos. That is part of the Churban, the bachurim. So this year, Churban Beis HaMikdash hits each and every one of us in a very personal way. And when we read these words on Tisha B'Av, bachurim meirachayvos, these words will be all the more haunting. I was asked to say divrei chizuk, divrei hesped, and I say very sincerely that I stand here before you with great trepidation. Who am I to address a tzara of this magnitude? To say words about what happened? Are there any words? There are no words. Ma noimar u'ma nesaper. Who hasn't taken a good look at the picture of these three boys, three innocent yeshiva bachrim, smiling, the simcha, with a gleam in their eye, a promising future ahead of them? Please look at that picture again and you tell me, are there any words? What can we possibly say? How can we even express ourselves? Don't the words of Yirmiyah Hanavi accurately express how we feel? Yirmiyah says, Mi yitein roishi mayim ve'eni mikardima. If only my head were water and my eyes a fountain of tears, va'evke yoimam va'layla ischalele basami. I would cry day and night for the slain of my people. There are no words to capture our grief. Only demise, only tears. Va'evke yoimam v'layla ischalele basami. We yearn for the end of the tsaros. We yearn for peace for Klal Yisrael, for the Gula Shalema, for Mashiach Tzidkenu. And if we could just imagine for a moment what that great day would look like. The day of the coming of Mashiach, what will it feel like? We would expect it to be the happiest, most joyous occasion in our lives. The most joyous day in history. A day of exhilaration. A day of euphoria. And yet the Navi Zechariah says something else entirely. Says the Navi Zechariah in Perek Yud Beis, Bayoim Hahu, on that fateful day, the day of the coming of Mashiach, Yigdal HaMisped B'Yerushalayim. The mourning, the crying in Yerushalayim will be enormous. V'safta ha'aretz mishpachos levad. And the families of the Jewish people will mourn and cry. The Navi Zechariah is telling us that the day of the coming of Mashiach will be the saddest, most painful day in our history. Says the Navi, more tears will be shed on the day of the coming of Mashiach than any day in history. Did we hear correctly? Crying, mourning, on the day that Mashiach comes? Rabbi say, are we missing something? Says Rav Simcha Wasserman, Zechatzak Levracha, Rabbi Chanan's son, Hashem Yimkom Damai. He offers us a very powerful thought, certainly worthy of our consideration. The Navi Yecheskel says, V'nosati lachem leiv chadash. I will give you a new heart. V'ruach chadasha etein b'kirbechem. I will place a new spirit in you. V'hasiroisi es leiv ha'even mikirbechem. I will remove your heart of stone. V'nosati lachem leiv basar. I will give you a sensitive heart. Says Rav Simcha, we see from here that when the Geula comes, the Rebbeinu Shem is going to give every Yid a leiv basar, a sensitive heart. But so long as when we're in Galus, the Rebbeinu Shem has given us a heart of stone. Why in the world would the Rebbeinu Shem give us a heart of stone? After all, doesn't a Yid need a warm, caring, sensitive heart? Isn't that the hallmark of the Jew? Rachmanim? Says Rav Simcha, God has given us a heart of stone on some level so that we can emotionally and psychologically survive the Galus. The Rebbeinu Shem has given us a heart of stone so that when our wives and children were murdered before our eyes during the Crusades, so that when thousands of Yidden were kidnapped and forcibly baptized during the Inquisition, so that when families were decimated during the Holocaust, so that when our dear brothers, Naphtali, Gilad, Eyal, are kidnapped in Eretz Yisrael and murdered in cold blood, we don't go mad. We don't become insane. So that our hearts are not fully sensitized to the enormity of the tragedy. Says Rav Simcha, Hashem hardened our hearts. Hashem desensitized our hearts in order to preserve our sanity and our normalcy. Truth be told, it's not all that good to have a heart of stone. We're supposed to be compassionate people, sensitive people, sensitive to the needs of our friends, sensitive to the needs of our neighbors, sensitive to the pain of others. And we all struggle, we yearn as much as possible to retain, to restore, to retrieve that leiv basar. Says Rav Simcha, the leiv ha'even is not an ideal situation, just a necessary one. But on that day, on that great day, the Rebbeinu Shem is going to remove our heart of stone. V'nasati lachem leiv chadash. V'ruach chadasha etein b'kirbechem. V'nasati lachem leiv basar. The Rebbeinu Shem is going to give us a heart of flesh, at which point we're going to look back at all the tragedies which we suffered. We're going to look back at the lives cut short, the brutality, the kidnappings, the Holocaust, the abductions. And on that day, it's going to hit us like a ton of bricks. It's going to pierce our raw hearts that have been numb for the last 2,000 years. And it will be a dagger to our hearts. And on that day, we will cry, and we will cry, and we will cry. Bayom hahu yigdal hamisped b'Yerushalayim. The mourning will be overwhelming, says Reb Simcha, because we'll have a lot of crying to make up. 2,000 years of galus. Marav Rabbi say, perhaps in general we may have a leiv ha'evan, but in the immediate aftermath of this tragedy, whose heart doesn't melt, seeing the faces of parents who have to bury their own children who were murdered by terrorists, whose heart doesn't melt, seeing the faces of the distraught Talmidim in the yeshivas, where these boys learned. Who can have a heart of stone? Listening to the words of Racheli Frankel, the mother of Yaakov Naftali ben Rachel Devora, who while he was missing, she was heard crying out, Naftali, my dear Naftali, Abba v'ima oavim otcha arein kates. Your father and mother, you should know, love you to no end. And she said, it's not just us. It's not just your biological parents. Am Yisrael hofech olamot kedei lahavi otcha habayta. The Jewish people are turning over worlds. There's no shul, there's no shtibel, there's no Beis HaKnesses, there's no yeshiva that's not pouring out their hearts in incessant tefillah. Anachnu ma'od mudayim lazeh. We are very aware, she says. She'am Yisrael korim shari shamayim betfilot. That the Jewish people are tearing down the gates of heaven in their prayer. Whose heart doesn't melt hearing these words. Who is not nisragesh, who is not moved, who still has the leiv ha'evan. What really got me was they found a piece of paper under one of the boys' Gemaras of a list of Masechtos that he aspired to learn. The shattered dreams, lives cut short. We read an astounding thing in this week's parsha. We have the famous incident with Bilam's donkey. Bilam's donkey's traveling. He sees the Malach Hashem. He doesn't budge. Bilam says, what's going on? Bilam takes the stick. He smacks the donkey. Vayiftach Hashem es pi ha'atzayin. V'atoymer laVilam ma asisi lecha ki hikisani zeshalish regalim. The donkey says, what do you want from me? What did I ever do to you? Hashem opens the mouth of the donkey. The donkey talks to Bilam. He says, why'd you hit me? And here's the Maisa. Hear what Bilam does. Bilam enters into a dialogue with the donkey. Are you kidding me? This is one of the most mind-boggling parshas in the Torah. Bilam talks back to his donkey without flinching. There's no double take. There's no, say what? Did you just talk to me? No. Bilam talks back to the donkey like it would be an everyday occurrence. This is Mamish Yatsa Migidrei HaTeva. It's one of the 10 miracles that God had to perform on the 6th day of creation of the very first Bein HaShmoshes. His donkey is talking to him, and Bilam talks right back. What in the world is going on? Says Rav Shimon Schwab Zecher Tzadik Levracha in his Sefer Mein Beis HaShoeva. A very interesting observation on human nature. He says, Ribbon Shalom gifted us. He gave us certain senses. We all know we have 5 senses. Sense of sight, smell, hearing, taste, touch. Says Reb Schwab, there's another sense. There's a 6th sense. The sense of being nispoil. The sense of being impressed. The Ribbon Shalom gave human beings the ability that there's certain things that impress us. To be nispoil, it's an expression. Something happens, I'm nispoil, I'm moved, I'm impressed. It made a rosham on me. This, Rabbi say, is a sense. And it is needed. It's needed in Avodas Hashem. Because when events happen, when tragedy strikes, when the Ribbon Shalom sends a person a message, when the Ribbon Shalom sends Klal Yisrael a message, your heart has to be sensitized to what's happening. But just like other senses, being nispoil is a sense that can be dulled, it could be coarsened, it could be deadened, and it could be destroyed. If a person listens to loud music long enough, one can lose their sense of hearing. If a person eats very spicy foods, they can dull their sense of taste. So too, says Reb Schwab, a person can lose their sense of being nispoil, their sense of being impressed. How does that happen? What will cost a person their sense of being impressed? And that, Reb Schwab suggests, is by gluttonously indulging in all of the pleasures and passions that this world has to offer. A man like Bilam is so obsessed with taiva, eating, consuming in the most obscene fashion. That's all that occupies his mind. He's so consumed in just enjoying himself, nothing makes a difference anymore. And if it's hard to relate to this concept, just go out and look what's happening in our very own Medina Shel Chesed. Does anything make an impression? For something to be newsworthy, it has to be more and more shocking. Music has to be more and more outrageous. The words that we hear have to become more and more astounding because we live in a society that lost its ability to be nispoil. The saying goes, America lost its shock value. Nothing shocking anymore. That's what happened to Bilam. Your animal talks to you, weiter, talks right back. And as sad as it is to lose one's sense of taste or touch or smell, it is equally disturbing to lose one's sense of being nispoil. While some people like Bilam can ignore even the most obvious, conspicuous messages from above, great people have fine-tuned, sensitive, spiritual sensors that enable them to hear the voice of Hashem in everyday occurrences. It is said that when the Chafetz Chaim would hear a clap of thunder, he would call out, "Was will der Tata?" What does Ribbon Shalom want? As indeed the Gemara says in Brachos, the purpose of thunder is la'akem, is liyasher akmimo shebelev. When we hear thunder, we may be startled for a moment or two. But the Chafetz Chaim would be nispoil. He would translate that fear into a perception of the voice of Hashem. Rav Yosef Zecher Tzaddik Livracha was born in Paltova, a city near Baranovich, and as a young boy, he came into shul one night from Arav, and he saw the shul had gathered for Tehillim, and there was a tremendous outpouring of emotion, the likes of which he had never seen. And he asked, "Is there a chayla? Is everything okay?" He said, "There's no chayla." He said, "What happened?" He said, "You didn't hear? There was an earthquake. Thousands of people died." He said, "Where's the earthquake? In the next city?" He said, "No. Not even in the next country. On the other end of the world, in the Far East." But for the people of Paltova, they were frightened because the Ribbon Shalom showed his wrath. That was enough of a message to inspire them that they have to do tshuva. These people were not Gedolei Hadar. They were not Tzadikei Hadar. Ordinary Jews 100 years ago. When something happened, they were nispoil. So on one end of the spectrum, you have a Chafetz Chaim. You have Yidden in Paltova. And on the other hand, you have a Bilam Harasha, who can see an open miracle. His donkey could talk to him and he doesn't get it. Where do we stand? Where do we stand? I don't think a person has to be a Chafetz Chaim, or even a Yid living 100 years ago in Paltova, to recognize that we're not dealing with natural disaster, we're not dealing with thunder and lightning, we're not dealing with earthquake. We're dealing with our brothers who were murdered. And when the Ribbon Shalom sends a tragedy of this magnitude, the Ribbon Shalom is talking to us. He's sending us a message. What does he want? What does Ribbon Shalom want? Years ago, there was a bomb on the number 2 bus in Yerushalayim. 23 Yidden were killed. And the question was, why did it happen? Different suggestions were made. The learning wasn't enough learning. Tefillah, tznius, talking by davening, all of the above. And they brought the question to the Paisek Hadar Rabbi Yashiv. And Rabbi Yashiv said 4 words. Ainli Asek ben Astaris. Says, I have no business in the hidden realms. Said he's not a Navi. He can't pinpoint one or many specific reasons why disaster happens. So why did it happen? I will certainly leave that to people much greater than me. But pater b'loi klum efshar. You can't just keep on going. Breakfast, lunch, and supper. Weiter gegangen. Shalom alayich nafshi. I'm okay. My family's okay. My neighborhood is okay. The Rebbeinu Shalom's talking to us. And we have to listen. At least we have to ask ourselves, Was will der Tata? What is the Rebbeinu Shalom telling me? What is Hashem asking from me? What message is Hashem sending me? Lev Yodei Amaras Nafshay. Nobody knows better than each and every one of us what we need to do, what I need to do. And to not ask, Was will der Tata? To let something of this magnitude go by without becoming changed, even in the smallest way, it's a wasted opportunity. When the Titanic sunk, there were various questions the Poskim brought up about Hilchos Iguna, women who had husbands on the ship. One of the Poskim write the following. He writes it parenthetically, Divrei Moser. He says, everyone thought they would be saved by the great ship. And it turned out, it were the little rowboats. The Gemara in Tainus we just learned, the Chafal from the Bay says, in Surah there was Dever. There was a plague in Surah, people were dying. Says the Gemara, the Shevavusei de Rav loy haya Dever. In Rav's neighborhood, nobody died. And everyone thought, it must be Rav, the Gadol Hadar. He's protecting everybody. Whereupon, says the Gemara, everyone in the city had a dream. And the Rebbeinu Shalom told them, it's not Rav. There's one guy in the city who has a shovel. And he lends out the shovel to people for Kvuras Mason. And the whole city is being protected in the merit of one person's Hanhaga Toiva of Chesed. The Gemara continues, B'derukaras, Havanura. There was a fire that burnt down a region in Bavel. B'shevavusid Rav Huna loy Havanura. And everyone thought, obviously it's Rav Huna. Whereupon everyone had a dream, says Rebbeinu Shalom, it could have been Rav Huna, but it happens not to be. There's one woman in the city that heats up her oven and allows her neighbors to make use of the oven. One Maisa Chesed of one woman protected the entire city. So the Rebbeinu Shalom is not perhaps looking for a complete overhaul. But if we're able to change one small, tiny way, one Hanana Katoiva, one Tikkun, one improvement, it could save the entire Klal Yisrael. Our hearts go out to the families of these Kedoshim, to their Chaverim, to their Chavrusas, to their Mishpachos, and to all of Klal Yisrael who feel their pain. And perhaps we can take some small degree of Nechama from the fact that when push comes to shove, and when it comes down to it, and when we really need each other, and when we need each other to lean on, here in Kew Garden Hills, we are able to come together as one unified community. Yeshivalite, Balabatim, Svardim, Ashkenazim, all denominations were able to come together at this time of tzara, arm in arm, to give each other chizuk, to show our true colors. That at the end of the day, we are unified, and there is achdus. And we turn to the Rebbeinu Shalom and we say, yes, Ata Echad, the Shimcha Echad, but please, Rebbeinu Shalom, look at Klal Yisrael, Umika'amcha Yisrael Goyechad Ba'aretz. May the neshamas of these Kedoshim have an aliyah. Yizichram Baruch. They should be Melitza Yesharim for all of Klal Yisrael. For Yeshua's v'nachamais, coming of Gula Shlema, B'bi Askal Tzedek, and Her V'yameinu. Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.